the Big 12 SEC Texas Oklahoma story. It's been kind of wild. 18 months, 562 days to be exact, since the Houston Chronicle first reported that Texas and Oklahoma had approached the SEC about possible membership back on July 21, 2021. Then, we've gotten all the way to Friday, where reports of an early entry to the leagues have stalled. Now, back in July 2021, the news was that Texas and Oklahoma were going to join in the summer of 2025, running out their existing contract with the Big 12. If we continue down this no deal path that we seem to be on after the meetings last week, they will join in the summer of 2025. So in the last 18 months, in a sense, nothing has changed. But in reality, everything has changed, because in September of 2021, just a few months after the announced exit, the Big 12 makes the move to bring on Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, and BYU. At the time, the language was they would be joining no later than summer 2024, which would be only about one season of awkwardness. But then in June of 22, Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, BYU announced they'll be joining July 1, 2023. Then later in June 2022, USC and UCLA announced their move to the Big 10, which will happen in 2024. So now Texas and Oklahoma, which kickstarted this entire wave of conference realignment, are going to be the last set pieces to move. In December 22, we get news that there is, quote, gaining momentum towards a deal that could bring Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC for the 2024 season, leaving the Big 12 1 year early and arriving at the same time that USC and UCLA will be making their move from the Pac-12 to the Big 10. And then here in February, we've got reports that talks are stalling. Dennis Dodd, so much good reporting out of this. CBS Sports' Dennis Dodd said that an offer was made to the Big 12 recently heading into this round of meetings, but that offer was rejected. He's got a great explainer on it. And he also notes in another report that it's, quote, not dead yet, but certainly things are slowing down. Pete Thamel, he reports that early exit talks have broken down, while Ross Dellinger from Sports Illustrated quotes multiple sources, including one that says that the situation is still fluid. So as we try to unpack all of this for Texas and Oklahoma, before we get to, the good stuff, like what this is going to look like, are Texas and Oklahoma well positioned, who benefits from them being stuck in the Big 12 longer, all that. What, based on y'all's read of the situation, seems to be the big hurdles preventing Texas and Oklahoma from leaving the Big 12 and joining the SEC?
I think there's only one hurdle, and I think it's pretty obvious. When Fox decided to pay the Big 12 all that money for its television rights, it wasn't so they could show Iowa State and Baylor games on Big Noon Saturday. It was so they could show Texas and Oklahoma games, so they can get the ratings, so they can get the advertising revenue, which helps offset the money they have to pay the schools and gets them the money that they want. If Oklahoma and Texas go to the SEC, they lose all those games because the SEC will be exclusively broadcast on ESPN. So unless there's some kind of make weight where they can give them the money that they are going to lose for those games, there is no reason for Fox to give ESPN what it wants. These are competitors for college football. They're not going to try to make life better for the other one unless they're getting something significant in return. So it's egos. The money will come from somewhere, but ego-wise, Fox will not let ESPN have its candy soon.
Right. Tom nailed it. So it's your disagreement about valuation, and I think it was Pete Thamel who said that that Fox views Texas and Oklahoma as more than half of the value of the Big 12 contract, which, if you look at recruiting rankings, or if you look at the stories people actually click on, I think Fox might be low on that. There's two teams in the Big 12 that click nationally, and there's 12 other teams that click regionally or locally. But then there's also the saving face and the ego thing. Like you said, to me, that's big there too. I'm sure if you're Georgia and you had to cancel your non-conference game with Oklahoma at the direction of the SEC because they were anticipating those schools joining, you're probably kind of annoyed. If you're ESPN, you're probably very annoyed because wouldn't you want to have 9 conference games to be able to broadcast? That's extra revenue, extra inventory for you to sell against. But look, Fox is enforcing its rights just as much as ESPN is here. Right? They need to get their pound of flesh for those guys leaving. And if I'm them, I'm asking for quite a few rights to future games.
Yeah, there are basically like trades that have been offered. Like the deals that are potentially going on here are between ESPN and Fox, and they involve like this is so much more complicated than exit fees and just that. Like the allowing them out would require a negotiation, allowing them out of the contract a year early, and that negotiation is absolutely being played by the television partners. And so they are like talking about swapping inventory to try to make the price right. And as we sit here in the wake of a blockbuster Kyrie Irving trade, I mean, it's like they keep running the trade machine and the trade is not successful. They continue to try to say, all right, so, and I do not know if this truly is it, but it's like, okay, we'll give you like a week 3, this Saturday at this time slot. We'll give you this, and this. And they just can't come to an agreement on it at all. I don't know that math and the dollar value of all those of all those different time slots and what regions tend to matter more or less. But this is a fascinating look into a sport that continues to be run by television executives.
So, no, go ahead, Tom.
No, you go.
All right, like I think one of the things, just to try to explain to people like how you could value it so differently. If you're Fox, the drop off in revenue that you would have in 24 from losing those games in 24, as Fox as a company is clearly trying to step up how much it does with college football coverage. Like they just hired Chris Felica off game day, like they're hiring other people. They're trying to make Joel Klatt into a really big national figure on par with like Kirk Herbstreit. So, if you look at what they're doing, they're going to need that cash coming in 24. So for them, not only is it here's how much we make off Texas, it's like here's how much we would not make, right? And ESPN doesn't really care about that. They're like, dude, we just care about the value of the game, not the drop off that you would have to having to do Baylor, Kansas State, which would be a stinker on Big Noon Game Day in terms of ratings. It might be a great game. So ESPN doesn't care about that. Fox has to, I think, go for even more than these games are probably actually worth because of like they're going to want those games and that revenue coming in now.
The only way I think that this happens at this point is either A, ESPN and Texas and Oklahoma agree to a financial sum with Fox in which they just genuinely buy themselves out of it, or B, college football playoff expansion is coming. The TV rights will be up for bid. ESPN gives Fox an extra playoff game or two. That I think would probably clinch them allowing Oklahoma and Texas to move for those games. Because I don't really think, like I read Dellinger wrote, you can see maybe Texas and Oklahoma schedule some road games against other Big 12 schools, which would then be broadcast on Fox. I don't really think that's going to do it. I think it's got to be like Fox doesn't have to do anything. You're going to have to overpay in a way to get them. And I think that would probably just be playoff games.
And again, that's like for those of us that are just college football fans looking in on this is why it's awkward. And this is why there is so much momentum to just get us settled, because 2024 is when the SEC is going to be all in with ESPN. ESPN wants to be able to debut its robust SEC package with the new look SEC, including Texas and Oklahoma. The college football playoff is expanding in 2024. So right now, if we follow the contract, we are looking at a world where the 2024 season begins and USC and UCLA are in the Big 10. And we've got a 12-team college football playoff, and Texas and Oklahoma are going to Orlando to go play UCF. Like with this one last awkward year, the SEC, ESPN are going to try to get all the chess pieces moved before this big page-turning moment that will be the 2024 season. Fox, the Big 12, and everyone who could benefit from Texas and Oklahoma staying in the Big 12 a little longer, they're not in a hurry to go ahead and get this settled. I got a question. Do Texas and Oklahoma benefit from playing in the Big 12 longer? Competitively, competitively mostly. So financially, there are differences in the per school payouts that you get from the media rights deals. But Oklahoma and Texas, according to analysis that I trust, has already been able to use that we're headed to the SEC approach on the recruiting trail. Like the idea that you are going to be, upping your recruiting game was one of the things a lot of people pointed to when Texas and Oklahoma made their move to the SEC, that they're going to be able to be in this, big boy league. If you want to go to the NFL, you got to be playing SEC football, this, that, or the other. Texas and Oklahoma just had great recruiting classes, and some of the strength of that it has been suggested has been that those coaches and those coaching staffs can say, hey, look, like this is going to be an SEC program soon. We're going to be in the SEC soon. But then you don't actually have to play an SEC schedule. You get to be on the recruiting trail selling we're an SEC program, but on Saturdays, you're playing a Big 12 schedule. Financially is probably not the same. Competitively, I think with these, newish tenures, Steve Sarkisian, and certainly very new for Brent Venables, if they could just keep stacking wins and stacking recruiting classes, I think it might benefit them competitively to stay in the Big 12 for 2 more years.
What are the odds that Texas and Oklahoma are the first expanded playoff team from the Big 12?
Oh, yeah.
75%, 80%?
High.
Given the way they're recruiting. I mean, they had the 3rd and 4th rated recruiting classes in the country. They also had the 3rd and 4th rated recruiting classes in the new SEC. Within the Big 12, nobody competes on that level for players. Now, they do occasionally lose games. I think a lot of it is culture and coaching and whatnot. But as far as just pure projecting and the talent they're bringing in, you have to think they're going to be the overwhelming favorite to get those bids. So, and then if you're the SEC, you're like, hey, we just added the Big 12's playoff team from 2024. So, like, you get to kind of brag about that. Now, you'd much rather have them in 24 in your league anyway. But for coaching staffs that are still trying to get their feet under them, this is maybe not the worst thing in the entire world.
That's what was ringing around in my head for sure.
I think there's a lot of validity to what you're saying. Yes.
So what is it? What the SEC league office, I think, is frustrated. I'm not reporting that, but I think that when you mentioned the getting Georgia to drop its Oklahoma game, there has been a lot of movement within the SEC office that was under the belief that this could get done in time for 2024. They are holding off on announcing any kind of like scheduling models or trying to set up any kind of future schedule. Everything is waiting on the arrival of Texas and Oklahoma. What does the SEC look like with Texas and Oklahoma in the fold when they join?
Looks pretty good, Chip.
Yeah. I do
they
think
still do East-West? Or do
the model they have to go with is 3-6. If they're going to a 9-game conference slate, you just can't do it East-West. It's not going to work. That's why the Big 10 doesn't work. Honestly, like I think they'll go divisionless once UCLA and USC join. If you go 3-6, that's the best way to do this. I think it creates the most connectivity year to year, and you don't have people going long stretches without playing the best teams. I think the teams that really benefit from this are named Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Kentucky, and South Carolina, because those are the teams that play the weakest conference schedules. If you take out like their own team quality, they're in the East, and they really benefit on an annual basis from only playing 8 conference games. If you add an extra conference game to those teams, you're more than likely adding an extra loss to the schedule. Not a guaranteed loss, but just a fractional loss for sure, on a year-to-year basis. So the bottom teams in the East are the ones that benefit the most from Texas and Oklahoma not joining right now.
Yeah, that model, by the way, is 3 annual rivals. Mm-hmm. And then to round out the 9-game conference schedule, you play 6 teams one year and 6 teams the next. So in a sense, you have gotten a chance to see all 15 teams in this 16-team SEC over the course of 2 years. If a player spends 4 years at a program, then he has the opportunity to play in every single stadium because you've done home and away with the rotating 6 in addition to your 3 annuals.
I don't know if anybody would ever agree to this, but if you're ESPN, you own every single SEC game already, right? Would you not just push for a 10-game conference schedule? Because your odds are your non-conference games. Let's be real. We've talked about how Fox and ESPN are in charge of whether Texas and Oklahoma can go to the SEC quick. They'll probably have an impact on non-conference scheduling too. Like, you should schedule teams that are part of the ESPN family. Don't schedule Fox teams. And then,
well, there's all the SEC, ACC rivalries anyway.
That's what I'm saying. So you've got those, and you're going to see that kind of, and you're going to see G5s and FCS teams that'll be coming to your school so we can broadcast it. We don't want you scheduling road games against Big 10 or Big 12 or Pac-12 teams. So do you not just push a 10-game schedule at that point if you're ESPN because you own all the rights to all the games anyway?
Probably should.
That's the That's the way down the line to me.
I don't think it's that far down the line.
Ooh, okay. Like within the 2020s?
I don't think it will. I don't know when they'll agree to it. It would be a while, but I think you start seeing that floated because that's just typically how it works. The things get mentioned and then a few years go by and it just happens.
I do want to point out the 3-6 model is not the same thing as pods. And the key difference in that in 3-6, you have 3 protected rivalries. In pods, you have 4 teams that are all playing the other 3 opponents in that pod. I don't think that's what's being proposed or is most likely, because that would really mess with the rivalries. Yeah. No pods, just 3 protected rivals.
The 3-6 model is also not the same thing as the 3-6 Mafia.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Shout out to Juicy J. All right. Anything? All right, so let's finish on this. When do you think Texas and Oklahoma are joining the SEC?
2025.
Yeah.
2025.
2025. And I'll go back to my biggest thought here is that if I'm Brent Venables, I would like to have a shot, win the Big 12, or even just make that college football. Making the college football playoff, even as an at-large team, is easier in the Big 12 than it's going to be in the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, will be very interesting. And again, those all of this is coming. If you are just sort of hearing about this story now, there were meetings last week of which the reporting going in was, all right, this is going to be one of the big issues on the table. And the reporting coming out was like, well, things have stalled, talks have broken down. A few sources are saying something could still happen, but the gaining momentum reports that we had back in December of 2022 no longer appear to be on the table.